I finally get to talk about Japanese history again. I love talking about it, but I just don't find enough excuses to do so. So if there's anything you'd like to know about it, or topics that I could talk about, please let me know down below. Hello there, I'm Simon. Welcome to my channel. Today's topic is something I saw on the internet a while ago, because I'm a nerd and a millennial, which means I spend half of my life on the internet. The point is that a couple of months ago, someone called Momo O'Brien, a YouTube nerd that I'm very much a fan of, tweeted this. This has got to be the cutest axe in history. It's got hearts! And I'm not sure if this is just me seeing what I want to see, or if it's actually like that, but if you look closely, you can actually see that it even seems to have this pinkish shine to it. It kinda looks like something a Harley Quinn-like character might use in an anime. So obviously I've been calling it the anime axe. I mean, what else are you gonna call that? So being the history nerd that I am, this thing intrigues me. So I want to use this week's video to put the anime axe into its rightful context. So let's go down that rabbit hole, shall we? There's a couple of ways to dig into this, and the smart thing to do would probably be to look it up in museum catalogs or something. Maybe see what Google Scholar has to say about it. But this is the internet generation, so let's see what the tweet has to say about it first. Because Twitter is a reliable source, right? So the tweet in question describes this cutie as a mountaineer's axe with heart-shaped holes and a bronze reinforced shaft. It came from Japan, dating back to the Muromachi period, specifically the 14th century. So what does that actually mean? Well, the Muromachi period is of course a period in Japanese history. It's also called the Ashikaga Jidai, which literally just means the period of Ashikaga. Ashikaga being the name of the family who got to be shogun. To summarize about 7 centuries of Japanese history in like 2 minutes, Japan was ruled by an emperor for basically its entire history, right? But in the 11th century or so, decentralization started happening, meaning that the power started shifting from the emperor to the local lords. Like, the emperor was there, but the ones who really had the power were the local governors, because they were the ones in charge of maintaining order, and they had the military force to, well, enforce it. Over time, some of those families grew really big and important, like the Taira and the Minamoto, who became the elite warrior families. And they ended up being hired by the emperor to fight rebellions. After a bit, somewhat of a conflict arose over who would be the next emperor, with the Taira supporting one guy and the Minamoto supporting the other. It was quite a legendary conflict. And since it was fought between the Minamoto and the Taira, it was called the Genpei War, because apparently the kanji for those names can be read as Gen and Pei. Apparently. I don't actually read kanji though, so I don't actually know. I'm wasting time. I got 2 minutes. After the Genpei War, one of the Minamoto was given the title Sei Tai Shogun, aka Shogun, aka General, by the emperor, essentially becoming the first shogun. So that's when he established what's called the Kamakura Bakufu, because he lived in Kamakura, and Bakufu means shogunate. After a couple of centuries of that, one of the emperors, called Go-Daigo, figured that he should be the one holding all the power, and not the shogun. So he staged a coup, which is weird, since he was supposed to be the one in charge. And with the help of the Ashikaga family, he actually overthrew the Kamakura Bakufu, restoring the imperial supremacy. That's what we call the Kenmu Restoration. I'm telling you, just in case you ever need to know that for a pop quiz or something. I mean, it's not impossible. 2 minutes. Anyway, Go-Daigo assumed that the Ashikaga would keep supporting him, which they didn't. They ended up beating him in battle, establishing a Bakufu of their own, unsurprisingly called the Ashikaga Bakufu. And just to be sure, they put like a cousin or something of Go-Daigo on the throne. It's not important. He's not very relevant. Anyway, That's how the Ashikaga Bakufu, or the Muromachi period, came to be. But during this period, there was decentralization once again. At this point, the emperor was still there, but the real power was held by the shogun, in theory. In practice, the shogun also kinda lost most of his influence, because one of the shoguns was murdered, and all of his successors were really bad at the job. Eventually, a bunch of successional disputes led to a repeat of the Genpei War, which is called the Onin War. And the Bakufu, kinda surprisingly, survived that, but it lost its shine. Unfortunately, there were also a couple of natural disasters, which kinda led the local daimyo to say, "Bleep this, we'll do it ourselves." And they were left being the ones really in charge. So, of course, they all wanted to become shogun, since the actual shogun wasn't really anything to write home about, which led to a period of war between all the separate states, which is creatively called the Warring States period. Was that 2 minutes? Probably not. I guess I'll find out in the edit. So that's the background in which we find the anime axe. This is a period when it was made and used. So now that we have the when and the where, and I suppose the what is kind of what sparked the video in the first place, I guess it's time to have a look at all those other questions. Who, why, and how. The who, not the band, or the doctor, is actually surprisingly simple. The tweet calls it a mountaineer's axe, which implies it was meant for a mountaineer. Now, I'm not actually sure what that means, but I suppose there's a lot of trees in the mountains. I don't go to mountains a lot, so I don't know. So let's dig a little deeper. Turns out the anime axe has a page on the E-Museum, which gives us a little more information. They call it a ritual axe for a priest of the Shugen sect. So I guess that's the who sorted. It's the Shugen sect. But who the Tengu are they? Well, as I understand it, there's this thing called Shugendo, which is a religion that combines Shinto and Buddhism, both of which I am in no way qualified to say anything substantial about. Anyway, a practitioner of Shugendo was called a Yamabushi, which means he that bows down in the mountains, because they went to the mountains to practice their meditation and ceremonial stuff. All I'm saying is that it makes a lot of sense for them to have a mountaineer's axe for ritual purposes. And I guess that also gives us the why. It's a ritual thing, because of course it is. Most pretty things are. Those things usually turn out to be ceremonial rather than martial. Or is it? That didn't quite grammatically follow from what I just said, but you get the idea. As I was sort of saying, this thing might just have been a little martial after all, because there were several Buddhist sects who legit launched armed attacks and straight up rebellions against some of the lords. I mean, they lost, and there were heavy reprisals against them, but they did it. And other sects were actually hired to help keep the order. I mean, at this point we're talking about the 16th century, so it's not super relevant for the anime axe, but the point is that it did happen. These guys were fighters. In fact, and I'm not sure if this is a coincidence or what the meaning behind this is, but a Shogun practitioner, like the one that would have used the anime axe, is called a Yamabushi. Yama means mountain, and Bushi can be translated as to bow down, or someone who bows down, I guess. But this might be a coincidence, but Bushi can also be translated as warrior. To be clear, they're not the same kanji, so it's probably a complete coincidence. But that means Yamabushi might also be translated as mountain warrior, which is pretty cool, even if it is complete horse manure. Which leaves me with one question. How? Well, in this case, I guess that would mean like, how was it made? And honestly, I don't really care. So feel free to look into that if you want, but I'm not going to. Instead, I do have another question, which is, what about the symbolism? What's with those hearts? Was that just a pretty shape, or does it actually mean something? As it happens, it does. And it has, unsurprisingly, nothing to do with hearts. This is called the Inome symbol. which means boar's eye. It symbolizes determination, as that is something boars are very good at. And it is very prevalent on weapons, which is yet another thing about the anime axe that kind of implies that it might have been more than just a tool or a ritual thingy. So basically, my conclusion in all of this is that if you want to play a monk from the mountains who wields an anime axe in your next D&D game, it would be 100% historically accurate. So let's do the YouTube thing. As you can see, around me is the famous end screen, which can tell you all the things you can do. So please do those things. Please? If you need some inspiration to comments, let us know what you think of the anime axe. I think it's pretty cool. And knowing the history behind it, it kinda makes me want to play such a monk in D&D. Also, are there other historical weapons I need to know about that may or may not seem to be taken directly from an anime? Or anime weapons that you wish were real? Let us know down below. That's it. Thanks for watching.